So we finally reached the point in the story where Izuku has unlocked all of the quirks of the previous users of One For All, meaning that he now currently has 7 quirks. But not only that, he can also use not only 100% of One For All, but 120 freaking percent of it, meaning that he's pretty much at the peak of his power right now, something that we've been waiting for a very long time. So I want to go over what makes him so powerful, as well as what all of his quirks are, so let's get into it. So first of all, of course, he has One For All, which came to be kind of accidentally because Yoichi, the first user of One For All, as well as the brother of All For One, had this quirk that only had the ability to pass itself on to other people, so it was kind of useless. And because of this, All For One thought that he was quirkless, so he forcibly gave him a power stockpiler quirk. This quirk, in theory, could accumulate power over time and make the user stronger. But when he did this, it wound up fusing together with his initial quirk that allows itself to be passed on to others, and this new quirk eventually comes to be known as One For All. And long story short, Yoichi eventually passes this quirk on to the second user, who passes it on to the third user, and once it eventually gets to the fourth user, Hikage Shinomori, this is the first time that a user of this quirk is actually able to take advantage of the power stockpiler, because he goes into seclusion for like 18 years and devotes his life to building up the power. And this is kind of like the beginning of what we see All Might and Izuku. Like, it wasn't always like that super powerful. It took time to get to that point. But after that, he eventually passes on to the fifth user and on to the sixth, and then it goes on to the seventh, Nana Shimura, who is the teacher of All Might, and then she eventually gives it to All Might. And he's the one who really makes it this super ultra powerful quirk that we come to know it to be. And then of course he eventually gives it to Izuku. And once he gives it to Izuku, this is kind of like the paradigm shift of the quirk, because Izuku was just in the right place at the right time to obtain this quirk as to where it fully unlocked its true potential. Because it's eventually revealed that the quirk factors of all of the previous users were mixed into the core of One For All. And along with it becoming progressively more powerful as the years went on, when it was being passed on from user to user, one user, Izuku, would eventually be able to use all of the quirks of the previous users on top of just having the power of One For All. But not only that, another anomaly has happened with this quirk. Now Izuku can see the previous users of One For All, aside from like their quirk factors, but also a part of them has been stored in the quirk as well, and now they're like manifested as like these pseudo ghost things that are pretty much sentient and have like their original personalities, I suppose, and can also like observe reality through Izuku and not only communicate with him, but they can like communicate with each other as well. And as the story goes on, this aspect of it gets stronger and stronger until currently where they could just pop out at any time and just talk to him willy-nilly. It's even gotten to the point of where like even All For One can now see the messages as well. But like I said, the quirk has just become so powerful at this point. And another thing that we've seen throughout the series is Izuku using percentages of it. Like, it started off with just 5%, you know, we eventually got to 45%, and using 100% of it was always kind of like a special thing. But like I said in the beginning, Izuku has reached the peak of his power, so now he can just use 100% of One For All, no problem. And this goes into another thing that I said in the beginning, as to where he's just surpassing that as well. He can just use 120% of One For All. But I guess it just means he's going beyond the initial limits of it. Like, he's that strong right now. But now I want to go into all of the quirks that Izuku has. So the first one that we saw him unlock was the fifth user, Daigoro Banjo's quirk, Black Whip. And it's quite literally as it sounds. He can produce like these black whips, and I guess they're like made up of some kind of energy. I don't really think it's fully explained what exactly they are, but they're pretty busted. Like, he can use this in so many ways. Like, it's a great utility quirk, not only for just capturing his opponents, but also leveraging off of things and maneuverability and mobility. Even recently, we've seen him using it in combination with his other quirks as well, and I'll get into that. But like, one of the main things is like straight up using it like a slingshot to propel himself even faster than he's already going, and he could use that synergistically with the other quirks. And that's another thing that I'm going to be talking about. All of these quirks kind of work together in a great synergistic way, as to where he's just become almost nigh unbeatable. But the next quirk that we saw him use was Float, and that belonged to Nana, the seventh user, the grandmother of Shigaraki, as well as the teacher of All Might. And it basically allows him to levitate. Like, he can't straight up fly using this, but like I said, using other quirks along with it, Izuku can just pretty much straight up fly at this point. The next one we saw after that was Danger Sense, and this allows Izuku to detect threats. I mean, it's you know, straight up as it says, danger sense. He senses danger. And let's, you know, call this for what it is. It's pretty much spider sense. And I'm sure we're all familiar with that. Like, he could sense oncoming attacks, even if he can't see them. Like, he can sense where other people are. Like, it's really cool. But there is a drawback to it, as to where, like, if the opponent or whoever else doesn't have like a malicious intent coming after Izuku, then he won't be able to detect it. Because we saw in like chapter 345, when Toga was trying to grab Izuku to pull him into her own warp gate, it didn't activate because Toga loves Izuku, so there was like no malicious intent behind her action. After that, he unlocked Smoke Screen, which originally belonged to the 6th user, and yeah, it just pretty much allows him to produce a smoke screen. And this is probably his least impressive quirk for sure. He doesn't really use it too much, but when he does, it's very effective. After that, he unlocked Fa Jin, and this belonged to the 3rd user, and this is by far one of his best quirks for sure, because this allows him to build up and store kinetic energy as he moves, and at some point he can just release that stored up energy and just have like one big explosive movement. Like, when he first starts using this, it's, you know, pretty impressive, but as time goes on, we see that he can just bust this out at any time, because he can always just store up kinetic energy using this quirk. Like, this is especially more busted in the latest chapters, because as he's fighting, he can just put all of that energy into using Fa Jin, and then just suddenly just release it into one massive attack or one explosive movement. And like I also said, he used it with Black Whip to like slingshot himself, but not only that, but he can also transfer the Fa Jin kinetic energy into Black Whip itself somehow, which he says is a boosted binding combo, and this makes the black chain. And then we come to his final quirk, which he recently just unlocked, and this belonged to the 2nd user, and it's called Gear Shift. And this might be, aside from One For All, his best quirk. Like, this is maybe one of the best quirks in the series, period, because it gives Izuku the ability to alter the speed of anything he touches. So like, he can touch himself or he can touch somebody else and alter their speed, either making them faster or slower. So like, if he touches himself, then he can start moving at an even faster speed than what he already has, because we know that he's already incredibly fast, because of course, just base One For All, and then we just went over Fa Jin. So then on top of that, he can use this and go even faster than that. But also, like, if he's punching someone, he's touching them at the same time, right? So then he can also activate Gear Shift at that point and make them move even faster than what they normally would. So, you know, like in battle anime, when somebody gets punched, they go flying. Well, now he can make them go flying even faster. But then there's like levels to it as well, because he can go into like 2nd gear, 3rd gear, top gear, overdrive, and incrementally just get faster and faster with every touch that he does. But like I also said, he can make things slower as well, because he can just be moving incredibly fast, but then he can shift into low gear and then suddenly just come to a complete stop, ignoring the laws of inertia. Like, that's literally said by the 2nd user. Like I said, this is crazy and one of the best quirks in the series, but also only because One For All has amplified it so much. It's not like this quirk inherently was this busted when the 2nd user had it. But going more into that, it said that its scope broadened, allowing it to apply to a more diverse targets and function right down to the cellular level. Like, he can speed up his entire being, like through all of his cells. And it also says warp the very laws of governing reality, as to where he can hit All For One with a quintuple Detroit smash. Like, he's hitting them so fast consecutively that it's seemingly happening all at one time. But yeah, those are all of Izuku's quirks, and we actually see him using them like all together in the latest chapter in this amazing sequence, where first he uses Smoke Screen to hide All For One and himself, then uses Danger Sense to locate exactly where he is, then flies above him using Nana's float quirk, then uses Black Whip to grab him and pull him up to him. Then it's also revealed that this entire time, you know, along with that quintuple smash, he was building up Fa Jin, so he has that in the tank. And then finally he activates the 2nd's Gear Shift to go straight into the overdrive aspect of it. And all of this together just winds up with him giving All For One quite possibly the strongest smash that we've seen from anyone outside of All Might in the series at this point. It's just excellent sequence. But yeah, that's Izuku right now in the series. Totally busted, and I don't think this is the end for him. I'm sure he's going to get even more powerful than this, but this is pretty much all that we're going to learn from him at this point, I suppose, at least with his quirk. But if we do get an update on One For All itself, I'll make another video about it. But let me know what you think about Izuku right now. Is he too strong? Which quirk do you like the most? Let me know. And if you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, so today we're going over the My Hero Academia iceberg, or at least one of them. There are many, of course, but this one that I found is like the most entertaining, I guess you could say, and it's pretty interesting too. And just like, you know, all of the fandom icebergs, it starts off pretty surface level, pretty tame, and then, you know, you start to go a little deeper and it gets a little more esoteric. But then once you go really deep, it starts to get pretty insane, as we'll come to see in this video. But I'm gonna go over what I think all the best little bits are, so let's get into it. So starting at the top, this is like the surface, you know, super casual level. Your mom probably knows this stuff. The show is very popular. Deku is the main protagonist of My Hero Academia, and there's waifu material in it. After this point, I'm gonna have to go into spoilers because the iceberg itself does, so if you don't want to know what's gonna happen, check out. Now we're starting to go a little deep, and we're coming to who is the traitor. And we found out recently that the traitor, or at least one of them, is Aoyama. So going a little deeper, Vigilantes is a spin-off and canon. Now, it's really debatable if the entire series is canon, like every single thing that happens in it. But there are certain portions of it that are absolutely canon, like Aizawa's backstory, you know, with all the Shirakumo stuff, because it's revealed that that is in fact who Kurogiri is. Yujiko was able to get Shirakumo's body and turned him into him. So now we're going a little deeper here. Fake Bakugo death screenshot. So this was like a big thing, I think like 2 years ago, where it just as it sounds, there was like this viral leaked manga page of the supposed death of Bakugo when it was just an altered panel of Shigaraki. And it led to a lot of discourse and angry people thinking that Bakugo had actually died. Okay, so going deeper, we have All For One is Deku's father. This is one of the oldest theories that still has yet to be proven or disproven at this point. But I guess one of the main things that kind of caused this was Horikoshi's love for Star Wars, and the big iconic reveal that Darth Vader is Luke's father, but also that, you know, All For One kind of has like the Darth Vader mask, and the fact that Izuku's father has yet to be revealed, and he's always kind of been a mystery, and the fact that Yujiko was Izuku's doctor in the very first episode, which led to the possibility of him lying to Izuku about him not having a quirk. And it's possible that All For One, I don't know, just was making these kids just to give them specific quirks so that Yujiko could take them, and Izuku's mom was just one of the unfortunate hookups that he had for this purpose. So going deeper, we have quirks are a virus. So this is a pretty interesting one, because at the beginning of chapter 158, there's like a narration from the perspective of Overhaul, and it says exceptional abilities, the mysterious mutations that suddenly manifested in humans. According to one theory, a previously undiscovered virus was spread all over the world through mice, but there was never any hard evidence to support that idea. I don't even know if Horikoshi will truly ever explain where quirks come from, but it possibly being a virus is one explanation. So going further, we have the original My Hero sketches. So as you'll see here, this was like the rough draft that Horikoshi had for My Hero. And yeah, it's a little off-putting at first, especially Izuku, who looks more Tim Burton-esque, I guess you could say. And also the character dynamics were different. Like Bakugo wasn't originally as aggressive as he is, but he was still kind of a jerk because he didn't have a filter for his thoughts. Also, Uraraka was supposed to have Mount Lady's quirk at first, and Izuku was always supposed to be quirkless. Like he never gets one for all, but he eventually gets like gadgets and weapons and stuff that are able to fend against quirks or nullify them or strengthen them sometimes or something like that. Okay, so now at this point we're getting kind of deep. So Ground Zero was originally Bakugo's hero name. So from one of Horikoshi's like original sketches for Bakugo, it said that his code name was Ground Zero. And it could also be in reference to the fact that he's very tied to when All Might eventually had to retire and, you know, lost his ability to be All Might at the Battle of Kamino against All For One, which took place because Bakugo was captured, of course. But as we know, his hero name eventually came to be Dynamite. Bakugo's friend is now a Nomu. So Bakugo's friend is the little kid with wings that we see in chapter 1. And one of the little bonus materials from one of the volumes, I forget exactly which one, I'm sorry guys, but it implies that the winged Nomu that we see like in the Stain arc is this kid. So somehow Yujiko got him and then transformed him into this Nomu, which is, yeah, pretty dark. Going further, we have the Taco Bell ad. So I'm sure so many of you are confused by this, and this is one of the reasons why this iceberg is so fun, because so apparently there was like this pseudo Deku Taco Bell ad that was heard as an advertisement on someone's phone, and it is pretty interesting, and I'll just play it here and you can decide for yourself.
Never stop. The warm nacho cheese sauce and savory Mexican spices will not let you get away. So there's only one thing left to do. Run to Taco Bell, because nacho fries are back. Head to Taco Bell and silence your cravings before nacho fries disappear again. Only at Taco Bell, at participating U.S. locations for a limited time only.
All right, let's go deeper. So Tokoyami is the quirk. This is super interesting because it makes you think like, wow, that would be quite the twist. As we see with Tokoyami, his quirk on the surface is Dark Shadow, but what if it was the other way around and Dark Shadow was actually the real person and Tokoyami was the quirk this whole time? All right, so now we're coming towards the bottom. We're not exactly there yet. Now we're coming to the theory that Deku, so this is getting pretty dark, I know, but we're looking at the theory that this is all kind of like a Jacob's Ladder scenario to Izuku, as to where like when Bakugo told him to like jump out of a window or whatever he said, he might have actually did it, or Bakugo's bullying pushed him to that, and his last moments of consciousness see this big fantastical story play out where his idol All Might randomly meets him and then winds up giving him One for All, and he gets to go on this big hero journey, but turns out it was just this one long death dream. All right, so now we're in the bottom portion of the iceberg and we're taking a look at the quirk theory, and I think this is probably referencing the My Hero string theory, but just string theory in general, as far as I know, and I'm stupid so bear with me, but going down to the bare essentials of existence, like beyond atoms, beyond quarks, everything is made up of these tiny little strings, and if you can manipulate these strings, then you essentially become God. And that's actually where like the multiverse theory comes into play. Like if you can navigate the strings or just manipulate them, then you could go to other theoretical universes or just control reality as a whole. And I guess this is like the end game of the series where Izuku eventually has this ability. I could be wrong, but since we're at the deepest part of the iceberg here, a lot of this stuff is so hard to come by or really just find out the origin of it or just the true nature of this stuff, because that brings us to the next theory here, and it's the Stairway to Heaven theory. So this is where things get really and fanficky and creepypasta-y. So the Stairway to Heaven theory, I guess, is based on the Stairway to Heaven incident, which is a creepypasta. And within that creepypasta, back in May 2021, there was this incident where people were rising to the sky, or the Stairway to the Heaven. And this is based off of the Troll comic that posits because oil floats on water, you simply just have to wait for it to rain. And since the human skin is already oily, you can ascend through the rain into the sky. But this relates to My Hero because apparently this happened or will happen in the series at some point, meaning that All for One orchestrated an event like this where he used some kind of quirk or someone else's quirk, maybe similar to Uraraka's, where he has everybody ascend to the sky in this big mass exodus incident, which causes many casualties in the process because they're not actually ascending to heaven. And this is one of the causes that led to All for One rising to power. Aside from him helping people by taking their quirks or giving them quirks, as we saw in the original flashback of his, this theory says that he grows to power through this big Stairway to Heaven incident instead. Let me know what you think about this iceberg in the comments, guys. Do you have some of your own iceberg stuff? Let me know. And if you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. So in this one, I want to talk about Shigaraki and how he got decay, along with the huge reveal about that is eventually going to come in the series, and is probably going to be the reason why Shigaraki ultimately breaks away from All for One and foils him in some way, if not just straight up killing him. So as we know by now, All for One brought up Shigaraki and pretty much trained him to be the despicable villain that he is today. He conveniently found him after he had inadvertently destroyed his entire family, and then became his surrogate father afterwards. But what if I told you it goes much deeper than that? Because this all goes back to All for One's original goal of trying to get one for all. Because one for all, of course, is the constant in his life that is always trying to stop him. But also it's pretty powerful as well, and it's also something that's always been out of his grasp. And that's because of the way that one for all has manifested over the years. It's developed this ability to resist the All for One quirk itself. So naturally, over all of this time, he's been trying to figure out a way to obtain one for all. And one way or another, he and Yujiko did figure it out. And it's that they need pure unrequited hatred in order to do that, but like in the purest sense. And for some reason, All for One himself doesn't have the necessary level needed in order to bypass the failsafe that is built into one for all, you know, which stops it from being taken. So he and Yujiko figured that the best way of doing would be straight up taking a child before he's fully developed, of course, and raising him into a pure hatred vessel. But this also goes into the other plan that All for One has, and it's upgrading his hardware for his software, meaning that his body can only maintain so many quirks and so much power. So after nurturing this child of hatred, they would eventually modify his body, you know, Nomu style, so that he is the ultimate vessel for All for One to transfer into, so that he can not only just take one for all, but he can also harbor all of his quirks and no longer have to worry about his body breaking down. And that's pretty much what they have done with Shigaraki up until this point. But in chapter 350, it was revealed that Shigaraki was not the only candidate for this. In fact, they had like this whole little makeshift orphanage going on, and Dabi himself was a part of it, and also it's heavily implied that Overhaul was a candidate as well. Because we see at the beginning of chapter 158, when Overhaul was a child, he's pretty much in the same kind of orphanage room that Dabi was in chapter 350. But on top of Dabi like burning down this orphanage place, I guess it just came down to all of them just not being good enough, which is why he ultimately settled on Tomura. And a little added bonus is that Tomura, of course, is the grandson of Nani Shimura, one of All for One's previous nemesis and holders of One for All. But the other big thing that came to light in chapter 350 was how All for One was dressed when he showed up to retrieve young Dabi after he had burned himself, trying to impress Endeavor. Because his appearance here all but confirms the long-standing suspicion that I, and I'm sure many others have had, and it's that he is in fact the same individual that we see in chapter 235, who drops off Shigaraki, who at the time was still Tenko Shimura, to his mother. But anyway, in that chapter, Shigaraki is like having some flashbacks of, and he remembers this time when he was dropped off by this dude who was All for One at his house. And afterwards, it specifically shows us that he is 5 years old at this time. This is important because Tomura didn't really have a quirk before this. He was pretty much implied to be born quirkless. And given the information that we've received in the series so far about how quirks manifest up until the age of 4, pretty much means that Tomura was born quirkless, since they're showing us that he's 5 here for a specific reason. But it's only hours after being dropped off by All for One that decay suddenly manifests within him, and it leads to the unfortunate destruction of his entire family. And then after this, he winds up roaming the streets, and as I said before, All for One conveniently finds him and takes him in. It was all 100% premeditated, of course. This is also the reason why he gives him the hands of his deceased family members to wear, to further keep him in control, but also to further nurture that hatred that is so crucial to his plan of taking One for All. I know, it's all pretty sick stuff, but All for One is like a despicable, unredeemable villain. We're not supposed to like him in the slightest bit, and we're supposed to, of course, feel bad for Tenko/Shigaraki, because ultimately he is a victim of circumstance. I mean, he is totally innocent. I mean, at first, of course. I mean, he eventually goes on to murder many people, but that's besides the point. But the real unknown thing here is decay itself. We have no idea where this came from or how All for One got it. Because when Yujiko is describing the decay quirk to Shigaraki, he says, a rare variant quirk manifested within you, one we've never seen before. So this means it's like a similar quirk to Eri's rewind quirk. She has like a variant that was never seen before as well. It didn't come from her parents or any of her bloodline. It kind of just manifested uniquely within her. So that begs the question of like, Where did they get it? Is it even really important? They just randomly get it from somebody and they were like, hey, this is the perfect quirk that we could just give to Shigaraki so that he can accidentally kill his family and then get all deranged and whatnot, you know, for our ultimate goal. And I speculated before that this could have been what Izuku's original quirk was. And I know you're saying, no, Deku was born quirkless. Yes, I know, we all saw the first episode. But if we want to go into some fun, you know, real deep theory territory, there's a 5-year age difference between Shigaraki and Izuku. So it's possible, not saying that it's the case, that when Izuku was born, All For One took his quirk. Now that goes into a whole other can of worms, you know, why would he be monitoring him and all that stuff, but we do know that Yujiko was hiding in plain sight in the very first episode. He's the one who tells Izuku that he was born quirkless. So he could have just been lying to him, and maybe he took the rare variant DK quirk from him and then gave it to Shigaraki. And then of course that would be a nice reveal later on and bring everything full circle. Maybe not, but you know, just some fun speculation. But speaking of huge reveals, like I said in the beginning, this all still has to come to light. The fact that All For One was the one who gave Shigaraki DK and, you know, caused his family to die, and he was just nothing but a big pawn for All For One in the end. And then, like I said, this will be the turning point for Shigaraki. So either this is the moment where Shigaraki is finally strong enough to break free from the control that All For One has over him, because as we've seen, he's kind of melding their consciousnesses together until they're one being, which will ultimately just be All For One, with the hatred imbued from Shigaraki. But then that still leads to hatred, and Shigaraki being this big, grotesque, pseudo-Nobu perfect All For One vessel that he is. He's not just suddenly going to turn face and be like, oh, I've seen the error in my ways, guys. So maybe it's at that point that Shigaraki becomes the big overall final villain of the series. But as I've also said many times in my previous videos, I think Izuku is somehow going to revert or just simply change Shigaraki back into Tenko Shimura, because we do see that there's some kind of lingering semblance of Tenko within Shigaraki's consciousness, and that aspect of him actually is calling out to Izuku, seeing him as the true hero that could possibly save him. But let me know what you think about all of this in the comments. If you like the video, guys, please give it a like. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, so in this one, I want to talk about quirks and what they truly are and where they come from, because as of this recording, we're about 351 chapters into the series and also in the final arc, and we still hardly know much about these things, to be honest. I mean, we know what they are at their core. They're the superhuman abilities that the people of the My Hero world have, or at least 80% of them do. But outside of that, we don't really know much. Like, for example, where did they come from? And why did it suddenly just start affecting humanity like around 100 years ago or so? So the little information that we do have is shown to us in chapter 1, and it says it all began in KK City in China with the news that a bioluminescent baby was born. After that, exceptional individuals began popping up all over the world. The cause was unclear, time passed, and the exceptional became the norm. Fantasy became reality, and at present, 80% of the world's population consists of superhumans with special abilities. So this is like, unfortunately, only one of two things where we get insight into where quirks come from within the series. Talk about the other later on, of course, but let's just go a little deeper into what we're finding out in the first chapter. So it's implied that the very first person to have a quirk was this bioluminescent baby, aka the glowing baby. And believe it or not, this is based off of an existing story. The very same story that a lot of battle manga is based off of. And that is Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. Series like Naruto, One Piece, Attack on Titan, and many others have drawn inspiration from this story. And it might be like a rite of passage to mangakas or something to adapt this at least slightly, because in the preface of this book, it says that it's referred to as the ancestor of all romances. is. Now, while those other series that I mentioned borrow way more from this story than actually what Horikoshi is here with My Hero, let me just go over exactly what he is adapting here so that I guess he can just say that, hey, you know, this is partly Tale of the Bamboo Cutter, so you can't say that I didn't do it, guys. I'm in the club too. But anyway, in the beginning of the story, there's this bamboo cutter named Takatori, and randomly one day he comes across this glowing bamboo stalk, and he finds within it there's like this small baby, and he winds up adopting this baby and eventually names her Kaguya. And to make a long story short, it turns out that Kaguya comes from the moon, and after this war of like the simps happens because of her, she eventually like returns to the moon. But the whole luminescent baby here, which is implied to have the first quirk, represents Kaguya, or this is at least Horikoshi's partial homage to the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. Now, since Kaguya came from the moon, does that mean that quirks come from the moon? I mean, I don't know if they exactly come from the moon, but it is possible that they have extraterrestrial origin, especially because in one of these first panels that we see while quirks are being described, where it says, and the exceptional became the norm, we see a depiction of space, you know, around Earth, with like the sun eclipsing over it. So does that confirm that they have extraterrestrial origin? No, but in my opinion, it probably does, because that's like the only explanation that kind of makes sense other than just it randomly just happening one day and the fantasy becomes reality because it just happened, that's it, and there's no further explanation to it, which always could happen. And to be honest, I'm kind of thinking that's what Horikoshi is eventually going to do here. I really wouldn't be surprised if we never find out where quirks come from, because, you know, like I also said, we're coming towards the end of the series and none of this stuff has had any light shed on it yet. But that's just kind of like the pessimistic part of me thinking that. The optimistic side does think that we will get an explanation as to what quirks are, because I do think that there has to be some grand reveal and ultimate wrap up to these quirks in general. But anyway, let's go a little further, because the other possible explanation that we get to the origin of quirks is revealed in chapter 158, and it's like through this overhaul narration, and it says exceptional abilities, the mysterious mutations that suddenly manifested in humans. According to one theory, a previously undiscovered virus was spread all over the world through mice, but there was never any hard evidence to support that idea. This all led to one particular chain of reasoning about the countless exceptional abilities. And then we see little overhaul saying it's a sickness. So I guess this is possible. And Horikoshi did put this here for a reason, or one of two reasons. The first being that it's the truth, because quirks do kind of act like a virus in a way, because it started with like one person, or at least it was implied that it was, and then throughout time it slowly started affecting more and more people until we are currently into the series where 80% of the population has it. And this could also lead back to some extraterrestrial origin, like, I don't know, some kind of space virus or something that came down and affected rats first and then they spread it. Or if there was some kind of thing that landed on Earth and produced the quirk virus, I don't know, maybe rats were in that vicinity first and contracted it that way. But another reason that Horikoshi could be showing us this is just to give Overhaul more development and just to show us more of his motivation and reasonings behind the way that he is. Because I guess it could just show that he heard one of these theories and it kind of warped him into thinking that there's sickness and it's a disease. And also goes into how he's like a germaphobe and all that stuff. And that's ultimately just where this begins and ends. And the whole part about where there was never any evidence to support this idea is the truth. And it's just a nonsensical theory, you know, similar to a lot of the ones that we see on social media, which unfortunately breed IRL Overhaul type individuals. Now, going back to me saying that a part of me does think that, you know, these quirks and their origin will be fully explained eventually, because in series that do have these big fantastical abilities attached to them, some of the times we don't get the big reveals until like the end of the series, such in case with like Attack on Titan and Naruto. So does that mean that My Hero is going to have a similar outcome as to where in the last, I don't know, 10, 15 chapters maybe, where Horikoshi just jam packs this exposition into these chapters explaining the origin of quirks quirks and what their ultimate destiny is. I think it's likely, because I do think that Izuku is going to have like this revelation or something like that, especially once the quirk singularity comes full circle. And I think that's another thing that has to do with quirks in general, because that has to be addressed, because over time, as quirks hereditarily mix, they become stronger and stronger until the point of where they become too powerful, and humanity will eventually end because of this. And while they keep saying that it's like a theory in the story and it's not guaranteed and everything, and because I assume that it is an inevitability, and that the only way to save humanity, at least for the long term, is to remove quirks from existence. And I've talked about this in many videos, but I think Izuku will eventually get One for All and All for One and like combine them together, and then use, you know, whatever ultimate superpowers that he gets at that point to remove quirks from existence, and then maybe sacrifice himself at that point or something. But it's possible that once he does this and he fully unlocks all of the power of One for All and All for One, and maybe he unlocks like some kind of Akashic records of the My Hero world or something, or maybe he speaks to some kind of super vestige or something like that, because I would say that maybe Yoichi could tell him more about the origin of quirks, but it doesn't seem like even he knows, and it's implied that he and his brother All for One are one of the first quirk users. But this could ultimately lead to it being revealed that they come from space or something like that, which I just think seems likely at this point. But that's pretty much all I have for this one. Let me know what you think about quirks and where they come from. Does it even matter to you? I know some of you don't even care about this stuff, or I would say most of you probably. I'm sure you guys are just more interested in if Bakugo is going to kiss Deku, which he probably is. But if you like the video, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, so we got a spicy My Hero theory we're going to be talking about today. And I got the Lunchtime crew with me, first time on the channel. What's up, man?
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I've got long time collaborator on the channel. Haven't been here in a while, actually. Turtle Quirk.
Yeah, it's been too long. Too long.
Turtle Quirk's back, and we're talking about the three major villains of My Hero right now. Aside from All for One, he's going to be out of the picture and not be redeemed, so he's not really applicable to what we're going to be talking about. But we're talking about Dabi, Toga, and Shigaraki, and what their future is. So currently in the manga, nothing has really definitively resolved with them. I mean, in the latest chapter, we saw that Dabi may or may not be dead. I personally don't think he is, because that would be kind of anticlimactic. At least we just have to see his straight up death in the next chapter for it to confirm. It can't just end there. But it's very likely that he passed out, because, I don't know, I just feel like he still has some resolution, at least to just talk to his family. As for Toga, she still has a lot to go. Probably going to get to see her go against Uraraka next. And then Shigaraki, of course, going against Deku as we speak. So let's just get down to like the core of it. It's very possible that these three characters will have forced redemptions. And by that, I mean like they might all be reverted back to being children. Now, what originally made me think this was in the latest intro for the My Hero anime, which I'm pretty sure season 6, right? There's like this instance where Shigaraki like dissolves, and then Tenko is the remainder. Like it's like there was like this Shigaraki shell around Tenko. Do you know what I'm talking about, Lunchtime?
Yeah, I get it. It's kind of like when in the intro, it's the referring to, do you know when Tenko is inside of Shigi in like visually in the manga as well? You see like the hands coming out of him.
Yeah, so like there's like that fragment of Tenko's personality that's still
in there, yeah.
And even just seeing that, because it's constantly brought up. It's one of the most recurring things that we see with Shigaraki, actually. And it makes you think like, wait, is this how it gets resolved? Like, is Shigaraki either going to be rewound, or there's some crazy quirkery be reverted back to Tenko? Because Shigaraki and Tenko have a common thing with Dabi and Toga. There's like the common theme between them is that they were all innocent children. They were all just fine. I mean, Toga's backstory more ambiguous, but she's more of a victim of having her quirk. Like, her quirk compels her to behave the way that she does. It's not like she wants to be like that. So it makes me think that like they're all were, innocent children, and they all grew up the same way, all became these despicable villains via things outside of their control. Like Dabi with the neglect from Endeavor, Toga with her quirk, and then Shigaraki, of course, with All for One targeting him because he is Nana's grandson. So is this ultimately going to be resolved with all of them possibly being reverted back to their child forms? I mean, there's multiple ways that this could go about, and we'll get into that. But what do you just overall think about that resolution to these characters, Lunchtime?
It's an interesting one because Eri is definitely like a Chekhov's gun the way she's been set up. She's like a power that is completely like almost overpowered in the universe the way it works, and she has to be used in the future. Now they kind of teased a bit of her power with like All for One, and All for One himself will eventually revert back to his child self again. But in terms of Toga and Dabi, it's interesting because I agree with you in the terms of they have to be redeemed somehow, a forced redemption. And currently with Dabi, it's just doesn't seem possible at all, really, unless something does happen. Like even his body-wise, he's just skin and bones at the moment. Like, not even skin, just bones at the moment. Toga seems most redeemable, weirdly enough, and it's Shigaraki. It is that child self. Like that child is calling out and stuff. And you always see, even in the flashback of when Doria wants to save Shiggy, it's young Tenko he sees. So having them revert back would make sense for Shigaraki and maybe Dabi. Toga, on the other hand, it's a bit hard to see in that regard. Like as much as she seemed the most redeemable at the start, now it's kind of like it seems less of to do with her. It's more to do with her current self rather than her past, as in she's come to terms with society and kind of with herself, where the others, something crazy happened in her past that just completely messed them up. Hers was kind of like a gradual one. So I can see it for the Dabi and Shiggy, but with Toga it's a bit up in the air, I'd say.
Yeah, I feel like with Shigaraki it's almost guaranteed, just because of the fact that Horikoshi's kind of gone out of his way to make it seem like Shigaraki and Tenko are two separate people. Because, I say up until relatively recently, we all kind of, Shigaraki was just a character who had changed throughout his life. But now it's like, no, Shigaraki and Tenko, two different people, get that in your heads. And then when it does eventually happen, we'll be like, oh, Tenko's back. But yeah, that is clearly being set up. But for Dabi, I feel like, I agree with what you said, Lunchtime. Like, Toga would be way too forced, I feel like. I feel like she's just like, she is who she is. And I don't know if the series is going to end with her in jail or maybe like in some kind of rehab so they can like kind of give her a redemption that way and she just kind of integrates back into society. But with Dabi though, I feel like that would be a bit less forced. I feel like if he did that, it wouldn't be the end of the world for me. I feel like Dabi, especially like I'm pretty sure in one of the recent chapters, wasn't there like a vision of like, there was like a what if panel of like if Dabi wasn't neglected as a child, wasn't there, right?
Well, he still looked like Dabi, interestingly enough. Maybe Horikoshi just wanted to draw him so, I don't know, the people knew what he was, but it more so was like if Dabi was still friendly with his family. And because I say he still looked like Dabi, he still had like the scars from what I remember, right? He wasn't just full blown like...
I think he was like...
I don't think he had the scars, no.
No, he didn't?
No, I think he was like a grown up version of Toya. He didn't have his like arms or stuff. I think he was still damaged, like as if he fought. But his face, I think, was back to like the white hair and the normal looking.
Oh, okay. Well then, yeah, that's even more so heading in that direction. But.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Because like they kind of, because even before this, like I think that's the second time this arc where Horikoshi has shown a potential future or like an alternate reality. I think the first time was when he showed like the adult versions of like Shoto and Deku from the back. And then now he's showing, potentially Dabi. I feel like, is he just like dropping the breadcrumbs? Like, yeah, I'm going to do this. Like, it's coming. Here's a little preview for you guys.
Kind of has that, doesn't it? The little like hints throughout. It's like, ooh, something's happened here. Especially, like, as you said, Tenko is definitely like, the way like even he has to save Tenko, not Shiggy. Just for that, it's like a definite. The other ones are kind of like, there's hints of it there.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you brought up Eri, because I guess that would be the way that this happens. Because we know that she can rewind people. I mean, it's implied that she like rewound her father to I can't even say it in this video, but you know what I'm getting at. But we so I'm also looking at the panel right here. Yeah, it is just normal Toya, but his right arm is missing. But we've seen that Eri's power, or at least a derivative of it that Yujiko made, can rewind you, just like it rewound All for One to a younger state. And that could be more foreshadowing too, like the way that it makes him so young. You know, maybe she does it to other people, and it, you know, reverts any kind of, I guess, damage they took as well, because she straight up brought back Mirio's quirk factor. So it also, you know, goes back to what you were saying with her being a Chekhov's gun, and she absolutely is. There's some major significant thing that she still has to do, and it could be so many things. Like, it could be Deku, I don't know, getting All for One eventually, which I think that he will, and then maybe getting Eri's quirk, and I don't know, he does some crazy thing like that. That's one big theory that I had, but other than that, it's just Eri somehow winds up on the battlefield, because why not? I know she shouldn't be there, but this is battle manga, and I don't know, she just does something, some huge EMP-like thing, or she just, out of the kindness of her heart, just rewinds the villains once everything's said and done, like once they're all defeated. And also them being rewound, I think would be a good way to end the series. Now, also, I don't want Dabi to be redeemed. Let me just put that out there. I say it all the time, but it's not in my control, obviously, but hypothetically, just for the sake of this theory, he does get redeemed. Him being a child Toya again, Toga being a child, and Shigaraki being Tenko. Also, we're just assuming that their memories are erased at this point, or restarted. They would be like the next generation of heroes. They can even join the class of like the kindergarteners, the one that calls Shoto 5PP Man. Like, they could just be integrated into that class, and now they're put on the right track to become heroes. And I was talking about this with Turtle earlier, but like, Tenko, if in theory he would still have decay at that point, he can easily use decay for good. Like, it doesn't just have to be a villainous quirk. Like, you know, for example, if somebody's like trapped under rubble or something, just decay the rubble and they're instantly saved.
Oh yeah. No, I definitely agree, especially now that he has like control over it. Before, when he, you know, when at the start of the series, when whatever he touched just disintegrated, but now that like you can see specifically, even like the previous war and stuff, when he didn't destroy the Nomus when he used it, like he has a distinct, he can choose what is and isn't. So in terms of like utility for hero wise, he could definitely use that quirk for good. There's a load you could do with it. And something interesting mentioned previously as well about Eri helping the villains out of the kindness of her own heart. Didn't they kind of like tease that a small bit with Overhaul, when they kind of like said, like, you know, Deku kind of said, I might show you to Eri. That could be like the introduction to that idea.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't get rewound. He should just stay limbless.
Yeah, it's a weird thing in the series moment. It's kind of like all about, you know, it's a hero thing, so it's all about saving people and, you know, like making sure the word saved. But I agree with you in terms of like, Dabi is someone I don't think should be redeemed at all. In terms of like, he like unalived lots of people. for a better term, unalived a lot of people. Like, even like in the series you see it, and like the whole like destruction of the war and stuff like that, and you see like even in Uraraka's story how like the effect of what the villains did and like how they like hurt so many people. Redemption for the characters has to be like nominal for it to feel like a redemption. And one thing as well with like Dabi not being redeemed was at the end of the last chapter, even when he was defeated, he was still like, I hate you all, like I don't want like to be here with you, we should all not be here, you know. He's very like, he hasn't like his personality hasn't done a switch, it hasn't done anything. So for him it'd have to be like a mental digression or something if he was to be reversed. But even at that, we've never seen
the memory being erased. I think that could be it.
Yeah,
like
it would have to be like, otherwise like there's like, you can't change that character part of him at the moment the way he is. It would have to be a memory erasure type thing going on.
And wouldn't it be so weird if like Dabi, imagine this, like Dabi's rewound, his memories are erased, so that means technically Shoto is now his older brother. Wouldn't that be like so weird? That would just, because he wouldn't remember anything.
Yeah, everyone else would remember, so it'd be like this weird, like, it's like, oh, it's older brother Shoto, which saying that, actually kind of, for some reason I kind of like that idea of being like older brother Shoto.
Yeah. And then also because like, I mean, now it's been revealed that like Toya has the ice as well, so like they are kind of the same. So like Shoto could teach him how to use the ice and the fire at the same time. Well, that could be quite interesting.
That could be interesting, and it could be going the whole thing of how, you know, Toya always wanted to be like the chosen one, the masterpiece. And now that they know he has an ice quirk, if they rewound him and got rid of his memories and he grew up again, he could be the masterpiece Endeavor was looking for. You know, he would fulfill his like so-called destiny almost of being the perfect hero.
And also
like a second chance,
something has to come of that ice quirk too, right? It would be so pointless if it was just revealed and then it's like, oh, I'm dead now. And then it's like, oh, all right. You know, like, oh, he had an ice quirk. That was interesting. I guess we'll never expand upon that. So that could be, I don't know, a possible way it goes. But other than that, if Eri, just a side tangent to end the video, if Eri doesn't do this, what do you, just, you know, rough opinion, theory, speculation, what do you think her Chekhov's gun would be, like her ultimate end thing that she very likely is going to do?
So my biggest fear for her Chekhov's gun thing is she's going to revert all the heroes back to normal forms. So kind of like, you know, Endeavor gets his arm back, just this person's healed, this person. That's kind of my biggest fear of her Chekhov's gun. That is a potential, because, you know, like, she has to be used and it would get rid of all the consequences for all the, like, you know, the dramatic moments. It kind of take away from them. In terms of her actual use, other than reverting them to children, it's a tough one to say, because her quirk is so like unique in that regard, and that, like, no, it just reverts people. Now it could be a case where the way she reverted, the way her thing was used to make the bullets to revert people's quirks, she could be using that regard. So instead of reverting them to children, she can erase quirks from people just naturally. So it could be a thing where she's used as kind of like a deterrent for villains, as in like she takes away their abilities, takes away all this, and kind of gets rid of the threat of them.
Yeah, that would be a cool way, like, you know, just all of the people in the world, because that was also explored earlier, like the heteromorphs, like they don't want to be that way.
Yeah.
And there could be like this new, I don't know, quote unquote vaccine. I don't even know if I could say that. Yeah, probably. I don't know. Enough time has passed on YouTube. But there'd be like this vaccine for like, you can get rid of your quirk if you want. And it was made through or synthesized through Eri's quirk. That would be cool. That's like another video in itself. Maybe I'll make a short out of that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this one, guys. I want to thank Lunchtime Crew for coming by. Awesome discussion we had today. Please check out his channel. Subscribe, guys. He's an up-and-coming creator in the My Hero community. I don't feel like there's too many nowadays. So, and you also do the spoilers, right?
Yeah, I do the spoilers and stuff, and there's always a spoiler warning. Just put it there.
Not for me. I'll spoil anyone. But yeah, check him out, and check out Turtle Quirk. Turtle Quirk is not doing My Hero, but he is doing Attack on Titan and Chainsaw Man, and then maybe some other stuff in the future.
Yeah, look out for that. Some other stuff is coming very soon, next couple of weeks, hopefully.
And don't subscribe to my channel. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye. All right, so I want to talk about some of the lesser-known villains, I guess, within My Hero Academia's universe. I mean, they're not canon by any means, but they're still a part of it somewhat, because the characters or the villains that I'm going to be talking about in this video are coming from an arcade game. And I'm sure there's like other villains that come from light novels and other obscure things like that within My Hero. But these villains particularly, we actually have like images of. And I think these are pretty interesting characters, at least most of them. And they have some pretty good designs. And it's just too bad that they were like regulated to this arcade game, which never came to America. And speaking of that, let me just explain it real quick. So it's called My Hero Academia Clash Heroes Battle, and it's like a typical Japanese arcade card game. And I know these things aren't in America, or I don't think anywhere else really. I think they're mainly just in Japan. If you're familiar with Dragon Ball Heroes, that's pretty much what this is, except just for My Hero Academia. But also being so obscure, it's like there's no footage that I could find of these characters like in action within the game. I mean, there's plenty of footage of like the standard My Hero cast, but like the 6 that I'm going to be talking about, I couldn't find 1 second of an MP4 on any of these, and I scoured everything. I went through the Japanese dark web. There is nothing. I could barely even just find screenshots of the characters within the game. I only found 2, but I guess it's understandable because you kind of just have to like be in Japan and play the physical arcade game itself and then somehow record the footage, which there are some videos of that, or maybe just one on YouTube that I could find, but none of them feature these like exclusive villains. So the first group I want to talk about are the Volcano Thieves, and it's like a team of 3 villains. And there's not much info to them. I mean, their name has thieves in it, so I guess that's what they are. They steal stuff. But as far as I can gather, they wouldn't be considered like a force within the My Hero world. Like maybe they're even a notch below the Shihaya Sakai, possibly. So the first member is Dusty Ash, and I really like this character. I mean, obviously she's aesthetically appealing, but I think she just has a great design overall, and she would totally fit into like the actual canonical series of My Hero. And it's too bad that she was regulated to this game where, you know, like a very, very, very small percentile of the fan base actually got to see her. But anyway, her quirk is called Dust, and I guess it kind of works the same way that Midnight's does, where she can like secrete stuff from her body. But in this case, it's like dust or ash, as you can see, and it's not really like powerful, I guess. I mean, it's effective. It's stated that she like uses it to like blind her opponents, and she create like a cloud of it. And then I guess she just mainly goes for melee attacks after that, because she has like this black bat thing, so that's fine. And she also has like a respirator, which is protecting her from her own quirk, which is pretty cool. That lines up with like standard My Hero mythology and whatnot. So the next member is Gust Boy, and he's like a heteromorphic type. He kind of looks like a duck, I guess, but he also has like fan blades on his fingers, and that goes into his quirk because he can like twist his wrists and his hands and create like, you know, fans and super powerful gusts, and it says even tornadoes, so that's kind of significant. So his quirk is kind of like Kaibaro's from class 1B, you know, the ability to gyrate and whatnot, but he can only do it for like a minute, then his joints will like become inflamed and stiffened and whatnot. So some good balancing there, I guess. And then the leader of the group is Volcano himself, and he has a pretty cool design too, and his quirk is called Eruption, and I guess he can generate lava pretty much by like burning his own fat cells, you know, similar to Yaoyorozu's quirk, I guess. And also the gear that he's wearing allows him to like regulate the temperature in his body and whatnot, and also like the glove that he has can make it shoot in like multiple directions if he like puts it on the ground and whatnot. So that's like one of the better quirks that we've seen in the series, at least for villains. Like if he trained or was as talented as Endeavor, he could be easily just as much of a force as he was. I mean, like if you're making the comparison like in One Piece between Ace and Akainu, Endeavor and this dude should kind of be similar, I guess. So the next group we're going to be talking about are called the Wild Villains, and they're led by this guy named Curator. Great name, and also another great design. I would have liked to see this guy in the actual series. I mean, I'm not saying like you have to have them having their own arcs or anything, but just maybe like, you know, one of those filler OVAs. These guys, you know, could have easily fit into one of those episodes. So apparently this guy's like cerebral and psychotic, I guess. And as you can see, he has like this half mask on. And apparently if that mask breaks, then he goes super crazy or something. And I was actually able to dig up what he looks like without the piece of his mask on. And he has like this disfigured portion of his face, kind of like Two-Face from Batman, I guess, or Phantom of the Opera, which is maybe this is what this guy is based on. This guy's quirk allows him to like transform into an anthropomorphic whale, which is cool, I guess. And he also has an ability similar to Gang Orca where he could shoot like this hypersonic wave at you that paralyzes you. And also he could shoot like a water jet from his mouth, I guess kind of like a hydro pump from Pokemon. So the next member is called Zookeeper, and apparently she is under some kind of mind control from Curator. It's not explained how this happened. Maybe it's a part of his quirk or something where he can control people, or maybe he used some kind of drug on her. I don't know, but her quirk is called Cleaning, and she can secrete like a soap-like substance from her body. I guess kind of like Suyu maybe. And she can like weaken enemies by cleaning them with it. So she has like a broom too. So I guess she like mops you or something. And also apparently she can like clean up crime scenes and like blood and stuff like that. So I guess that's useful. And then the last member is called Bearhead, and apparently this guy willingly is with Curator. I guess they're good friends or something. And this guy's just a straight up heteromorphic, like, bear type. That's his quirk, just bear, and he gains all the abilities of a bear, I guess. So he's kind of like Suyu as well, as where it just says her quirk gives her the abilities of like a frog, but, you know, amplified to a super hero degree. Same thing with him, just bear stuff. So that means enhanced strength, great durability, acute senses, and large sharp claws. And he apparently has a move called Roar of the Beast and Fatal Wound, whatever that is. This guy kind of reminds me of Chimera from the Two Heroes movie. I mean, I'm sure he's not as busted as that character was, but more or less kind of around, you know, the same wheelhouse, I suppose. And apparently this guy also shares a design with Shikuma from Horikoshi's previous work, Umagadoki Zoo, which might mean that Horikoshi did in fact design the characters for this game. I couldn't get any confirmation on that, but considering how their quirks are and how they're like balancing and just the overall design of the characters, makes me think that he definitely had something to do with the creation of these characters, if not just their designs. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the lesser known villains of the My Hero universe. Let me know what you think about them in the comments. If you liked the video, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe. Please, trying to reach 100K by the end of the year. Also, I have a Patreon, a Twitch. Check those out as well. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one. Going into My Hero manga spoilers in this one. So if you don't want to know what's going to happen past season 4 of the anime, I suggest you check out now. All right, so I think I got a pretty fun theory today because it revolves around Izuku's original quirk and what it could have been. Now you might be thinking like, well, they said in the first episode that Izuku was born quirkless. So like, what are you talking about? How did he have a quirk? Well, I'm going to explain that, of course. But before I can even explain what his original quirk could have been and why it might have been taken away, I first need to establish like another wild theory or hypothesis or whatever, and that is All For One being Izuku's dad. Yep, so I know that's a pretty popular long-running theory within the community, but maybe some of you aren't aware of it, or maybe some of you are aware of it but just don't know the finer details of it. So first let me establish that, because it's going to make all of the other stuff with his quirk makes sense. All right, so Izuku's dad, one of the, if not the most mysterious character in the series, pretty much, and that's like a big red flag right there. This guy is hardly ever talked about. This guy apparently is always away because of his job. Now that's another red flag. And the fact that like he is a person that exists, and the fact that he's never around, never talked about or anything, it's interesting, right? Because like, if this character was going to have this type of role in the series, why didn't Horikoshi just like have him die, you know, like in Izuku when he was like a kid or something? Maybe villain killed him or something, I don't know. But like the fact that he's could be, you know, out there, he could be, you know, in the story at any point is interesting. So the thing that like really makes this muddled is like, we don't know the last time he was like home, or like the last time Izuku saw him in person, because it goes back to when he fought All Might in their primes. That was like 6 years ago, and then All Might turned him into a potato face. So like, what I'm saying is 6 years ago, he formed his potato face. I don't think he'd probably be showing up home or like seeing Izuku's mom or Izuku, because, you know, it'd kind of be hard to explain the potato face thing. So I'm thinking that like, if Izuku's dad is somehow confirmed eventually to not have been home for the last 6 years at least, then I think it's very likely that it's All For One. So also another thing about All For One is that we never fully see his face, going back to like the potatofication that happens to it. But even before that, like when we see flashbacks of him in the manga, in the anime, whatever, it's like always obscured in some way, either by shadows or there's just some kind of obstruction to it. Now I thought originally that this was just because I don't know, maybe All For One represented like the ultimate evil. You know, maybe he was like more of an abstract idea or something rather than like representing an actual person. So he doesn't need too much of like a definitive identity to him. You know, I thought, okay, that's cool. But now I'm thinking that, like, maybe it's because if we see his full face unobscured, maybe it will reveal he looks like Izuku or something. I mean, for the most part, Izuku definitely looks the most like his mom. They both have, like, the same hair color, the same eyes, and basically the same, like, facial structure and aesthetics and everything else. But if we go back to, like, young All For One, or young girl All For One in, like, the flashback, his hair kind of looks like Izuku's. Kind of. I'm not saying that this is like the smoking gun here and then this proves it. I'm just saying, like, you know, just look at it. Kind of looks like. And also, another big bit of connective tissue that we need to fit in here is that Horikoshi is a big fan of Star Wars, like a big fan. Like, there's so many inspirations that you can just see in this series that are coming from Star Wars. Like, you could just talk about it for like a half hour, all the cities and everything else. But also, there could be character parallels and storylines as well, because look at All For One, kind of looks like Darth Vader here. We know that Darth Vader, of course, it's the big twist in Star Wars that he is the father of Luke, which would be the big twist in My Hero here. You know, Luke would be Izuku, and then, of course, like I said, All For One, Darth Vader, dark side versus the light side, All For One, one for all, you know. So then we have that established that, like, All For One is possibly Izuku's dad, and that brings me to what Izuku's original quirk could have been. Now, let's go back to when Yujiko, you know, that's a big one right there, who's hiding in plain sight in the first episode, even for the audience, when he, who's, of course, you know, All For One's right-hand man, tells Izuku that or tells his mom too, that he doesn't have a quirk, and then shows him the x-ray of the pinky thing, which could easily be fabricated. I mean, it's Yujiko, would you really put it past him? But anyway, that whole sequence right there, I think, is not only setting up that All For One is his dad, but it's also setting up the big, like, ring scheme operation that All For One and Yujiko have here. And I think it's ultimately coming down to when we see Yujiko's, like, quirk collection that he has, like, in his lab beneath the hospital. Like, the way that he was able to harvest all of those quirks, I think it has something to do with, like, this scheme that he's running in the hospital with taking quirks from these kids. Now, it also comes back to what Izuku's mom has to do with this, and, like, why All For One had to be with her. So I'm thinking that, like, All For One, it probably just randomly seduced women throughout the years in case they had, like, a quirk that he wanted to, like, pass on to an offspring or something, or that he wanted to take from her, or he wanted to take from the kid. And I think that's what's going on here, is that, like, Yujiko and All For One are kind of just, like, breeding these kids to have the quirks that they need, and then they're taking the quirks from them, you know, when they're of age, like when the quirk would manifest, I don't know, like when they're 4 years old or something, and then just simply telling the parents that, like, yeah, sorry, he was born quirkless, and then showing them, like, a fake x-ray, which you're not going to dispute, because why would you? And then, you know, that just adds to the collection further, and also them developing the quirks that they want. Now, I don't think this is essentially the only method that he has to create or replicate quirks, but it's definitely one of them. And I think it goes back to, like, what Yujiko is talking about, like in chapter 260, like when Mirko is, like, breaking into the lab, and he's like, do you have any idea how long it takes to replicate and manifest a quirk? And I think that one of the reasons why he says that is possibly because, like, you know, All For One needs to find the woman that he's going to, you know, elope with, and then they need to make the act, and they need to create the kid, and then the kid needs to grow up to be, you know, like 4 years old, so his quirk can even manifest for them to take it. So that could be one of the reasons why it takes so long. This is like a 5-6 year process just to, like, make one of the quirks they want, or to replicate one of the quirks. And replicating the quirks, I think, could be All For One itself. Like, I think that could possibly be Izuku's original quirk, which would be pretty cool and, you know, poetic and tying everything together, don't you think? Now, I'm thinking that, like, All For One tried to replicate his quirk, but maybe he found out that the only way to do it is to pass it on hereditarily. You know, because that's, like, one of the other themes in the series. It's like we've seen, you know, Bakugo, Todoroki, they got their quirks from their parents. So I'm thinking that, like, he tried to do that with his own quirk because he wanted to replicate it, of course. And according to the quirk singularity theory, All For One would technically become stronger, you know, being hereditarily passed down. But maybe in this case it doesn't. You know, maybe it just becomes like an inferior version, or maybe just it's like a lateral improvement possibly. But anyway, he finds Izuku's mom and then decides to be with her so that he can pass on a duplicated or a synthetic version of All for One to Izuku so that he can take it from him, so that, you know, they have the backup. And it could also be the quirk that they give to Nine. You know, maybe that could explain that, because we find out, you know, Nine's origin with Yujiko in the Vigilantes bonus chapter. So this could be that, or it could be something else as well, or it could just be another quirk that we've seen All for One or Shigaraki or somebody use. Maybe they used Izuku just as like some way to manifest a new quirk that they just needed or something, you know. And also, I think this is the origin to the decay quirk from Shigaraki, which, you know, requires like a whole nother video to go into, but just keep that in mind as well. And now I just want to like answer like, why Izuku? Like, why was he chosen? Why was his mom chosen? Like, is he the chosen one? Is he like playing a big part like Shigaraki and All Might and all of them? It's like, no, I think he's just a random bystander. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or in this case, maybe the right place at the right time. Because I think that All for One chose Izuku's mom because she looked like Nana, the 7th user of One for All. And that's like, why? Now, this is going to go back to like after All Might fought All for One and like had that discussion with Izuku's mom and Izuku. And then after that's all over, All Might talks to Izuku and he's like, yeah, your mom kind of reminds me of Nana. And more or less, I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, yeah, maybe it's her hairstyle. I don't know. She reminds me of her. So when I originally saw that, I was like, oh, that's weird. Why did he say that? Does that like have a bigger meaning to something? Or is that going to play a part later on? Or is that just subtle development for All Might's character or something? I don't know. But now I'm thinking that this might mean, now I'm big stretch here, big jump, but stay with me. I'm thinking this might mean that All for One maybe was in love with Nana or something, or like liked her or something, and like obviously she didn't reciprocate the feelings, and maybe like, I don't know, he just went after women that look like her, and like that's just randomly why Izuku was born, because of All for One liking Nana possibly. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the video today, guys. Let me know what you think about this theory. I mean, if you liked it, guys, if it entertained you, please give it a like. I also have a Patreon. It gives you access to weekly Q&A, and if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. I'll have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.